Alright, I'll play Metroid. Calm down, all three of you, take it easy. Man, for a second there, I thought my very guardians were turning against me, violently demanding that I play Metroid for the NES after my mind was utterly blown by Super Metroid, saying things like, "But Milky, you have to play Metroid now and do not complain that there isn't a map because that's a stupid complaint and we don't want to hear it." Well, played I did, struggled I did, and changed I was. You guys weren't being violent, you were just passionate about giving your boy Milky yet another phenomenally stressful experience. So for that, I thank you. This was actually just me talking to myself at 3 a.m. about playing Metroid, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about Metroid ever since I played Super Metroid. I just figured I'd put the blame on you guys. So, there's that. Hey there all you beautiful guardians of the glaze. Welcome back to the Milky Donut. If you're new here, this is the Milky Donut. We do all things video games, movies, and pop culture. And if you're not new here, you have a beautiful smile. You should do that more often. Welcome back to the Regress series, where we play old games, half of which I've never even heard of, just to see how much we've gained, or maybe how much we've lost, in the world of video games. And before we yet again jump back into our video game time travel machine, as always, I would like to mention that I do have a goal of reaching 10,000 subscribers as quickly as I can. So if you could go ahead and like this video, leave the glaziest of comments, hype it if you can, and subscribe if you think it's worthy of the algorithm. As always, shout out to the subscriber of the week, Mr. Madskill Production, and feel free to run this video up because you could very well be next week's MVP. And with all that nonsense out of the way, let's journey back to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and revisit our favorite celestial body, planet Zebes. And yes, I know you guys corrected my pronunciation, saying Milky, you incompetent idiot fool. It's actually Zebes. But you know what, I like Zebes more because it's fun to say, and make fun of me all you want, but you're talking to the guy who called On Guard from Donkey Kong Country and Guarde. So yeah, welcome to the Milky Donut. You know, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually have the nicest subscribers, because as a massive Zelda fan, for Metroid fans, this is probably the equivalent of somebody saying Hyrule, so I understand any crash outs that may ensue. If I heard that, I'd be like, eject, you're done, get it out, send it to me in the mail, give me the game. You're banned. Although not many of you requested that I play Metroid, playing it after experiencing Super Metroid creates a unique perspective on the series for me, so I thought it would be an interesting stop on our endless time travel journey. Super Metroid is often regarded as one of the greatest video games ever made. I just so happen to agree. Praised for its atmosphere, exploration, level design, and sense of discovery, as well as being one of the foundational elements for what would later become the Metroidvania genre. If you've watched part 6 of this series, where I played Super Metroid, you know that it actually became one of my personal best games that I've ever played. Because of this, it would have been very easy for me to just assume that the original Metroid on the NES serves primarily as a historical curiosity, a rough draft of ideas that wouldn't reach their full potential until years later. While this is definitely no Super Metroid, and there are certainly elements of truth to that, spending time with the original game revealed to me something that is far more impressive than just a game that's sitting in its successor's shadow. Rather than feeling like a completely different experience, which it does in some regards, Metroid feels like the foundation of a vision that was already remarkably clear from the very beginning. And we spoke about that at the end of my last video, how old school game designers felt like they had clear visions for their projects, something that is far more rare of a feeling in the modern age of gaming. And playing Metroid did nothing but further convince me of that opinion. One of the game's greatest strengths is, I just want you to take a wild guess. If you know me, you're gonna get it right, and I want you to comment if you do get it right. It's atmosphere. Despite the limitations of NES hardware, Metroid yet again, well, actually, I guess it wouldn't be again, because this game came first, so Metroid creates a very convincing feeling of isolation that remains effective years later and gave birth to the masterclass of atmosphere creation that would come to fruition just 7 years later in Super Metroid. As you would expect, Planet Zebes is presented as a hostile and mysterious environment filled with strange creatures, mind-bending mazes, and unsettling music. Unlike many action games of its era, Metroid is willing to embrace long periods of exploration where you as the player are left alone with the environment. The decision to make isolation a core part of the gameplay design is genius, because the end result is a sense of loneliness and vulnerability that became one of the defining characteristics of the entire series. And while yes, Super Metroid would definitely later refine this atmosphere with much more detailed visuals, environmental storytelling, and 16-bit music, the core feeling of being stranded on an alien world was already firmly established in the original game. Metroid wasn't here to play, it was here to leave its immortal footprint in game design, that of which I feel like it accomplished. The exploration is another area where Metroid demonstrates ideas that are far ahead of its time. Instead of guiding you through a series of clearly defined stages, the game encourages you to navigate the interconnected world completely on your own. Progress is strictly tied to discovery, with new abilities gradually unlocking previously inaccessible areas. Another element of game design that I've recently become a huge fan of. Progress is not possible without discovery, and discovery is not possible without progress, creating a masterclass in level design, at least at the conceptual level. And as I briefly mentioned earlier, this design philosophy would later become a defining feature of the Metroidvania genre, but its origins can be found right here. And man, this game is very, 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 very difficult. At one point, I was getting so lost so often that I had to take a break, only to come back and realize that I was now even more lost after taking a break because I couldn't even remember where I came from or where I was going. I was on the brink of giving up, and then I remembered all of my Unk Guardians in the comments. Yeah, I'm talking to you. The only way that I was ever gonna beat this old school gauntlet was to become an old school gamer. I could hear a whisper saying, "Use the paper, Milky. Focus. Use your anger. Do it." Like some kind of gaming Sith Force ghost. And yes, Sith, because old school games definitely turn you into a villain. It's like the very souls of all of you game veterans suddenly possessed my very own hands. I looked into my desk drawer and found the first piece of graph paper I could find, and I started mapping. Every room I went into added more ink onto my paper. And suddenly, it all started to make sense. With the help of the manual, my own self-made janky map, and a whole lot of luck, I managed to make my way through. Only here on the Milky Donut can we make a game that has about a 2-hour playthrough time turn into what felt like 20 hours, but getting lost and having to explore your way out isn't part of the experience, it is the experience. Unrefined, yes, but the experience nonetheless. The game's upgrades are especially noteworthy because so many of them would become staples of the series. The Morph Ball, missile expansions, energy tanks, and beam upgrades all make their very first appearances in Metroid. While these abilities are simpler than their later incarnations, they still serve the same essential purpose: expanding your capabilities while encouraging further exploration. Finding a new upgrade provides an immediate sense of progress, and each one helps transform the seemingly impossible maze of ZBs into a world that becomes ever so slightly more manageable over time. And the feeling of thank God you feel after finding an upgrade in Metroid is almost more prevalent than it is in Super Metroid, because health grinding is pretty much mandatory here. You constantly have to make sure you're keeping your energy tanks topped off enough to even be able to progress. This game is very, very, very hard and unforgiving, almost more than I was expecting for some reason, which you'd think by now that I would know, but I guess not. I really think the only reason I was able to get through it was because of maps, manuals, the internet when things got way too confusing, and the fact that I played Battletoads, which helped callous my soul enough to keep going. So I didn't even truly beat this game how many of you probably did back in the day. My hat's off to you guys and gals. This is why you are my guardians of the glaze. Metroid also introduces many of the characters and concepts that would end up defining the franchise. Bosses such as Kraid and Ridley, while they may lack the spectacle that they would later achieve, their presence gives the world a sense of structure and danger. These encounters help establish the ideas that Zebes is inhabited by powerful creatures controlling different regions of the planet. Super Metroid would go on to expand upon these ideas significantly, yet the groundwork for the series' lore was already being laid in the original release. Of course, Metroid is definitely not without its flaws. The absence of an in-game map can make navigation extremely confusing, but I struggle to say that that's really a true negative because with a map, the experience would be completely different. Now, whether that would be a good or a bad different, that's for another timeline to decide. Also, coming into this from Super Metroid, different environments do eventually come off as a bit repetitive, and do make it difficult to distinguish one area from another. The game's password system reflects the technological limitations of its era, and certain design decisions can definitely feel unforgiving. However, many of these frustrations are much easier to not only forgive, but even appreciate when viewed within their historical context. In 1986, man, this game came out in 1986. Wild. Very few games attempted to create a world this large, let alone being interconnected and completely reliant on player-driven exploration. What makes Metroid so fascinating to new players today like myself is not simply that it inspired games that would end up perfecting the ideas it gave life to, but that so many of its core ideas remain compelling. I mean, so compelling that their DNA is still heavily present within the Metroid series and other franchises that followed the path that Metroid paved. Is it a perfect game? Absolutely not. There are definitely lots of rough edges and unrefined elements that make it frustrating and feel unfair. Is it too difficult? Well, some may argue that there are elements that are unfairly difficult. There are plenty of issues, but those issues are what gave birth to the improvements that the later games would eventually implement and perfect. Plus, the atmosphere, the sense of complete isolation, rewarding exploration, even with it feeling very rough at times, and gradual accumulation of abilities all form the foundation of a design philosophy that continues to influence game devs decades later. While Super Metroid and other later Metroid games may represent the series at its peak, the original Metroid demonstrates that the essential elements of those masterpieces have been present since the very beginning. Beneath its imperfections lies a game that was remarkably ambitious for its time, and one that continues to offer valuable insight into the origins of one of gaming's most influential franchises. Metroid is absolutely a diamond in the rough, rendering it simply a victim of its time. And with that, we come to the end of our time travel journey. As always, I had an absolute blast playing Metroid, even though it literally took years off of my life doing so. I don't know why I didn't expect this game to be as difficult as it was. You would think I would know better by now. But do you prefer old games or new games? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to see more of this, feel free to drop what you'd like to see next in the comments. And if you've already given me a recommendation, don't be afraid to leave repeat comments, because sometimes the comments do get lost, or I just forget the comment that I thought looked interesting and I need a refresher. So don't be afraid to comment more than once. That's totally okay with me. Don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe to become a guardian of the glaze, and I'll see you next time on the Milky Donut.